I'm I'm irritated because a referee that's been reviewing a paper of mine just got so much wrong that it's just frustrating. But now I'm talking to you, so
Well, let's make it a better day, okay?
God, this is
Yeah.
terrific.
Okay. Well, we're recording, so I'm just going to get started here. Welcome to Talking to Horses, the podcast. Before me is Dr. Joseph Geraci, and I had to write down your pedigree here because it's quite a cool story. So I'm going to go ahead and rattle off some information about you, and then we'll get going so that everybody kind of has an idea. Dr. Geraci is a true polymath. He's got a professorship a professorship at Queen's University in molecular medicine. You also are a professor at the Center for Biotechnology and Genomics Medicine for the Medical College at Georgia University. You're also a visiting science for quantum computation and neuroscience at the University of California, San Diego, and the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination. You hold a PhD in physics from the University of South California. You hold a PhD in mathematics from the University of Toronto. And you also have a bachelor in neuroscience and philosophy, I believe. More important, I think, and what we're really going to talk about today is that you are the chief scientist at Netramark, which is a AI machine learning LLM that you co-founded with a few other individuals. And I think that's the real linchpin of this conversation, is that there are some really incredible things that your team is doing with regards to the research into cancer. You have worked with or integrated yourself with DARPA, with NASA, with the FDA, and you are also a AI machine learning specialist. So welcome to the show. That's a little bit of a resume, and that doesn't actually include it all. You're a humble guy. You and I have thankfully had a couple of great conversations already, so we've broken the ice before today. Before we get started on all of the incredible things that you and your team are doing with regards to research into cancer and how to integrate machine learning into how you can develop and treat the disease, see the way that you can look at trials for medicine and how to integrate them properly so that you're not missing the mark, so to speak. I would prefer, if it was okay, that you could tell us a little bit about your backstory, starting from when you were a child and what led you to this path, because it's quite an incredible path. And there's not very many people in today's day and age, that the 21st century, that are true polymaths. So I'll give you the floor, and I'd like a short synopsis of what went on in your life from a child up to the point that you realized that you had a significant gift, and then you've been utilizing that gift to serve the community and serve the whole world, hopefully.
That's very kind of you, and it's great to be on your show. So you want a story about how this all evolved, eh?
Yes, sir.
So I think let me tell it to you in a few stages. So stage one was I was uh, I was about 2.5 years old, and I asked my brother what the last number was, and, and he said, I'm a 2.5 year old, right? And I was very interested in numbers already, right? And I'm like, what's the last number? He says, there is no last number, and that created a very strange effect on me because infinity, like, what do you mean, right? So I started to grapple with the notion of infinity, and I started to design my own fractals when I was about 5, 6 years old, right? The fractal nature of the universe became something that I started suspecting. I didn't know what it was, right, until I became a mathematician. But it was a natural kind of lead up for me. And then what happened was, I went through school, and, I found the math courses great. They were fun and all that. But what I was really interested in was I was interested in biology, and I was also interested in quantum gravity, right? So I was like in high school, I was already starting to think about, oh, how do you unify quantum physics and gravity? General relativity, which is actually on my chest right now. Just noticed.
There you go.
But So I started becoming really interested in the foundational elements of what makes our universe go, right? Like
Yep.
everything from like subatomic particles to thermodynamics and all this stuff. I just became obsessed with this idea that, we might be living in a pixelated universe,
Mm.
right? Where, but we can get into that later. But anyway, that's what happened. I thought I was going to go into medicine. And then I met graduate students when I was an undergrad, and the grad students were just crazy. Some of the stuff they were doing. So they started influencing me because I was part of their labs. And then I became obsessed with algebraic structures. So a lot of people don't realize this. Like numbers are not the only mathematical structures that have algebras. You can have other objects like knots, right? And there's other objects instead of numbers. There's matrices and other mathematical objects that we can discuss. But I started getting into this idea of like, oh, there's this abstract structure. How universal is this? And once I hit, Jason, it was over. I quit everything and I just started taking math, right? And because I was like, what's hiding underneath all of this structure? Why does the universe even have this ability to be explainable through math? Right? I think I have an answer for that. But anyway, that's what happened. And then I ended up dedicating myself to mathematics. And by the time you get there, it opens up this world, Jason, like new games, new perspectives. It's this marvelous structure that you become used to engaging with. And you climb that ladder and it just becomes more and more beautiful. I know people think I'm nuts when I say that, but before I stop talking, you can take over. I want people to understand that when you hear a piece of music that gives you shivers, or you see a piece of art that makes you pause, that part of your brain that makes you feel that way is the exact same thing a mathematician experiences when seeing mathematics. It's all the same kind of unification, awe-like experience, I think.
You're in the realm of the sublime at this point.
Yeah.
I want to get into the math part and how it fits into biology, but what did childhood feel like for you with, there's not very many 2-year-olds that are walking around wondering what infinity is and then building matrices in math um, at the age of 5 and 6. Or you told me a brief story about how you rewired a radio so you could almost kind of spy on your parents, or what was it, so you could tap into the phones.
I would
Uh,
broadcast my signal to their radios. So I take over the radio. I try to take over
yeah.
the radio.
So what was childhood like for you? And I'm not asking if it's traumatic or anything, but it's got to have been unique. I'm looking for your perspective, the human perspective on this. What was it like?
It was lonely. And it's not like from a bragging perspective. It was truly, deeply um, lonely and concerning. And I was very shy about how I looked, right? And it was hard. It was hard. Like what I remember most is kids playing, shirts and skins, right? Complete like incapacity to partake in that. I was always wondering how everyone was so comfortable, right? And also like I started having questions that couldn't be answered with the encyclopedias in the house, right? And so I went through a lull period, and then as a teenager, I became just a voracious reader. I became obsessed with just learning everything I could, and preparing to be a technically creative person, right? And I would build, like I used to have my own. My parents were very kind to me. They let me build a lab in the basement. I set a whole basement floor on fire. I I created bombs. I actually like I created like mycelium scaffolding that I tried to program.
Oh,
Right?
wow. Are you
I,
talking working with mushrooms here?
like the shit I tried and blew up. I created a lie detector that won me a science fair. That was
Oh,
true. Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. It's always yeah. That's what ended up happening. I started hacking shit, right? Especially
Well,
myself. The same rule, like I realized that lifting weights and doing crazy exercise is just like hacking a different machine. You just hack yourself, right? That attitude stayed with me.
Yeah. So mathematics became like a language to you, if you will. Is it's something that, so for a lay person like me, I can recognize and appreciate that numbers are meaningful, that it seems to be that the universe is such that mathematics is built into everything. Whether or not the universe knows that math is built into it or not, the way that we have learned to understand the universe, it is perfectly like math is integrated into it, and it was meant to be discovered. Is that a fair assessment, that you see math as a language, that you can actually look at it, you close your eyes, and the way that language works for me, mathematics is the thing that you see?
Yeah, and there is that aspect of it. What it's more like, because working something out is hard for anybody, even when you're good at it. Because what I mean by hard, it takes energy, right? Like you have to flow through the steps, but there's an intuition that emerges, which is much like your intuition for language, right? Like you can intuit a great. Because I've listened to your poetry and stuff, right? You can intuit combinations that are expressive, right? So with math, you can intuit something similar, but in the end, you're going to have to work something out, right? To
Yeah.
prove something, you're going to have to derive a result. And it can be very hard, right? To control all of the different dimensions you're trying, right? But you can still develop that intuition that a poet develops for language. That's what it's more like, right? Like I have, like, for example, like today, one of my scientists asked me about a clinical trial, and there was a problem. The problem was that there was a lot of different clinical sites. You understand, like people at a clinic, when you do a clinical trial, people have to come into a site to get their medicine, and there was people in different Asian countries, different South American countries, and most of them were in the United States. But we had to control this, and they're like, "Oh, how do you do it?" And I just immediately in my head thought, "Oh, we have to." My intuition was we compared the distribution with a Kullback-Leibler divergence, and I worked it out. And I'm like, "Oh, actually, Shannon, right?" When I worked it out, I'm like, "Oh, my intuition was right. You just have to maybe do this to make it more symmetric, and do this, and now I have an algorithm to do it. It's beautiful, right?" And that's what I mean. Like a poet, I thought, "Oh, this is what I feel should be there." And then when I work it out, it's like getting the syllables to work out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about that privately. We were kind of discussing how things come forward. And I explained to you that I don't have the ability to consciously write. I have the ability to consciously allow the pen to flow or my fingers to type. And it seems to come from the unconscious, and then it becomes conscious as I'm doing that. I don't know if it's the same for you. I don't know if when you're conducting an experiment or doing a thought experiment in your head, that you are able to, maybe that's the next level. I'm not claiming to be anything like you at all, but maybe that's the next level, is that at some point you can actually take all the front loaded data that you have. You said you became obsessed with math, and everything became math, math, math. And like I was telling you, I spent 20 some years reading everything I could, not even realizing that I didn't necessarily understand it. I was reading for this whole point of reading. And then it took my life to catch up, so that the things perhaps manifested in my unconscious, and then they come forth. Is
Yeah,
is it similar to that?
yeah. Like my master's supervisor was this great mathematician named Israel Michael Siegel, and he taught me the Russian way, which is you work hard, 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 and then you sleep, and the sleep reveals it,
Mm.
right? So then what happens is it works, just like you said. The problem is you can have the dream of the solution, but then you're going to actually have to work the monster out, right? And when you're
Yeah.
writing your poetry, it depends on how it comes, right? Or when you're writing a piece of music, you might have the theme there, but when you put it down, there's work to be done, right? There's like Leonard Cohen used to suffer over his poetry. They were like children, right? And he would adjust and adjust for years before we heard closing time or anything like, because he was very careful. There's that element. Not to all poets. Like Jack Kerouac wrote on the road on a scroll. He took a scroll of paper and he adapted his newspaper so he can just write on the scroll. That's how he did it, and he wrote it fast. You understand? His masterpiece was done in like a couple of sittings, if not one,
Wow.
right? And if you read on the road, you see that there's these spates of ecstasy that he's experiencing, and that you get to like if you really get into it, like there was a scene where he's like starving. I haven't read this book since I was a kid, but I can remember the scene. He was really hungry, and he sees angels diving into infinity. And he was just inside a flow state when he was writing this. Because I
Yeah.
entered into this, as I called it, when I was a teenager, I called it an infinite spate of ecstasy. Right? It's the way I described Jack Kerouac.
And
But
that's the flow. And that's the flow state.
yeah, and the flow state, now that's the real thing, is the flow state is a real thing that high performing people who get really good at their craft, whether it's a harmonica or jumping off of a mountain in one of those ridiculous suits that you can fly in, which I love watching people do because I'm too terrestrial to do anything like that, right? But the reason I love extreme sports is I love it. I love the insanity. Is because I recognize in some of those moments the same thing I'm experiencing when I hit a flow state and an algorithm comes to me or a piece of mathematics closes up on me.
Interesting. And you have a couple of unique things. One of that I read while looking at your LinkedIn profile, and another that you explained to me. Two things that I want you to expand upon a little bit. One is that you have a mathematical synesthesia, and two, you often find solutions while you are dreaming.
Yeah,
Can you dive into those one at a time, because those are really unique circumstances? And see, for me, I don't ever get what I would say is conscious revelation in dreams, but often when I awake is when I do my best writing. So that's what
yeah,
it's very curious.
yeah. So a cool example that I think your audience would enjoy is talk about my wife. She's way too pretty to marry me, but this is why she married me. So she has epilepsy, and I was observing her, and she had a seizure, and another seizure, and we fell in love despite the seizures, right?
Yeah.
And she one day on the couch had a seizure, and her breathing stopped. I picked her up, put her on the floor, called the hospital that I was working at. This back then I was not an entrepreneur yet, right? So this is 2014, and I have her on the floor doing chest compressions, and I call uh, Toronto Western Hospital, and I say I'm Doctor So and So, and so they send over people, and the whole thing scared the shit out of me, Jason. Like it was really like to
Yeah, no
see
kidding.
somebody you care about, right? And, okay, so here's this very young woman who bounced out. Her readings were perfect. And I'm like, this is crap. The meds she's on, crap, crap, crap. So I started thinking carefully about what was going on. And I had a dream about her vagus nerve, which is this wire that comes out of the base of your brain. Parts of it go through your neck and stuff, right? But it goes through, and then one branch goes to your heart, one branch goes to your gut, and another branch goes to your genitalia. And I had a dream about this thing, and I think I woke up in the dream. I woke up from the dream, and I'm like, I think I know what to do. So I called up a colleague that eventually I got to this company that has these external vagus nerve stimulators, these devices that you push up into your neck, and it
Mm-hmm.
electrocutes you. Her family thought it was hilarious when I said, "I want to electrocute your daughter through her neck." So anyway,
Yeah, that's
she
something to put to the father-in-law, right?
so she gets this device, and her seizures go down by 85%,
Hmm.
like instant, like. And then she took over. She adopted, and then I found another device that does it even better through the ear. Because there's a branch of the vagus nerve that goes through your ear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I talked with people. One guy, this insane physician, literally spent. He went through like 30 different cadavers, taking apart the vagus nerve. So I listened to him, and anyway, so we got this really expensive device that she plugs into her ear, and she adopted it, and she got her driver's license back a few years
Yeah,
ago.
that's incredible.
Yeah. So that's a dream. And to me, it was a math problem, right? To me, it was like her, every time I observed her, her heart was doing something low, her blood pressure low, other things. And I'm like, it's all vagus nerve, right? And yeah, so and I've done that with math problems too, as well, right? And then the synesthesia that you talk about is a weird flow state sensation when I work on certain types of problems, but it also translates into colors and like something that I describe like a taste.
Yep.
I can like feel the structure, right? And
Is it a taste that is akin to anything that you taste in food, or is this a completely unique flavor, or some like that might not be the right word? You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, is it?
it's it's like it's almost like I've never eaten chalk, but what I imagine like it's this chalky sensation that I get. And then numbers have personalities to me. So if you give me any number, I'll tell you what it feels like to me.
Really? So if I say 75,
Yeah, it's a happy, serious number. It's a happy,
interesting.
serious. No, it's happy but serious.
So
Enterprising.
is that are those grouped in by primes or by like odd and even numbers, or is every
No,
number that you get something that gives itself a personality?
it has to do with the colors and personalities of the individual digits. This is a branch of math called number theory. Not my branch. Maybe the branch that uh, I might have been intuitive, but I was more interested in the universe. So I studied more like differential geometry and analysis, like different branches of math and topology.
Yeah.
Right, that's what I became very obsessed with. But there's these patterns, right? And somehow I can intuit some of these things.
That's very interesting. Have you met anybody else who has this, who
Yeah,
shares this?
I met one person who has this mathematically, but I meet other people, like my colleague at CAMH. I'm affiliated with CAMH, right?
Yep.
Dr. James Kennedy, he has synesthesia for letters and names have colors, right?
Interesting.
We often play this game like, what color is this word and what color, right?
Now, when you
So
say that, when you talk in synesthesia and you are saying that you associate or you have a sensation, where is the color appearing in your consciousness?
it's see what's happening is so our brain people with synesthesia, our brains are organized just slightly differently. There's a lot of cross, right? And I've had the fortune of working with neuroscientists and psychiatrists, and
Hmm.
so they've done tests on me, and I've been in MRIs and stuff. And so there is this. So what's happening is it's hard to the color's there, right? But it's what's happening is you're crisscrossing senses, right?
Hmm.
People who take a good amount of LSD can experience this because you're knocking out the thalamus, right? So I think we're using like the thalamus is integrating information in a unique way, and there's usually some information about it, and
Okay.
some of it's just useless. Right?
It's kind of like trying to describe if you see color in your dreams or not. You know, you might say you do, but it's a sensation that you feel that sort of ends up lacking a description when you try and explain it. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what I'm getting from this, and I could be going out on the wrong limb here, but I don't
but
like. People ask me, "Do I see language?"
yeah, yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like, do I see the words that I'm writing, or do I hear them? And I can't answer. I When I try to think about it, then all of a sudden, of course, I'm going to put words in my mind, but I don't know at the time if I'm seeing them or it's a sensation that can't be explained.
Well, okay, this gets to the brain, but let me give you an example. Like the number 378.
Yep.
Does it? Do you feel anything about it?
It's meaningless to me unless it is associated with something, and it isn't for me. So,
Okay, 378 weighs on me. Like it really like 358 blows me away. Like that's just right. 370 or like 111. Like why aren't you prime? You're not prime. You're 37. You're 30. There's 37. Like what's going on there, right?
yeah.
Times three, right? Right. Yeah. Like what? Like there's like literally I can feel again. It's sometimes it's like pain, sometimes pleasure, right? They weigh on me. That's the way to think of it. And like network structures,
Yep.
those things really I get like I compute somehow with these things. It's how I solved my PhD problem. It's how I solved a lot of the problems I worked on in cancer early on. It's all graphed, right? Everything's like connected. It's all like webs.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into that on another episode because I really want to dig into your Netramark machine
Yeah.
learning program that
Yeah.
you. So let's move there because obviously your affinity for math and your obsession with biology and how it works in the grand scheme. You know, you've been thinking about infinity, and then that brings you to like, well, what does biology mean in infinity? That you keyholed that into machine learning, and through machine learning you developed Netramark. And I'd really like to for you to explain for everybody listening, because I don't know how popular Netramark is really. You don't like, obviously it's really important. I've looked into it through your LinkedIn and I've Googled it, and there's some great information out there, but more people need to know about this because there's some fantastic things that are going on with it. So take me through the history of Netramark, what it is, how you ended up getting to there, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this aspect of my life. So, I just finished my math PhD, and I had several opportunities in the United States and in Canada.
Mhm.
And some reason, I was always attracted to oncology. I wanted to understand cancer more, and I met this great guy, Dr. Igor Geraci, who's a computer scientist specializing in the way our proteins talk to each other. So he saw my work. I explained the graph theory. He's like, he liked me, right? So he's like, come, I have money. And then I had the great fortune of spending part of my time with him and the other part of my time with an actual oncologist, Jeff Liu, at Princess Margaret. So I had an office at Princess Margaret and an office in Mars, kind of like an incubator for startups and labs and stuff like that. And so, and there I am thinking I understood graph theory and math, and and I start learning that the way cancer works is that there's actual errors that accumulate that disrupt the network structure, the abstract network structure. And for you to understand this, our proteins they they either touch each other transiently to pass a phosphate or whatever, right? Or
Yep.
they clamp onto each other to create a structure that something can plug into. Our bodies are this like mix of metabolites and proteins, right? This molecular machinery ballet that requires diffusion, randomness, and really, really accurate combinations of events happening. And through, millions and millions of years of evolution, there's engineering solution over engineering solution piled on top of each other that make up our cells. It's very beautiful. It's
Mhm.
it's way more beautiful than any other fantasy we might have about how nature came about. This is right awe-inspiring. Anyway, we can get into that. But so what was happening is I started learning about all this, and I started becoming very interested in how DNA codes protein, like the whole thing, right? And then I would get data sets of cancer patients. And my students would be like, hey, Dr. G, can we use a deep neural network to study this? And I'm like, there's 30 women in this ovarian cancer data set. You can't use that kind of AI. I go, but you can use other machine learning stuff. Let's see, right? And then what happened was I fell upon this really powerful revelation while I was playing with this stuff, which is a piece of mathematics that I started playing with, where I would think about the sequences of our genes. And then I started helping people with drug discovery. So I started learning enough. And because of my math background, I picked up machine learning very quickly. This is early on. This is 2008, right?
Yep.
And I started picking up all of this stuff, and I started learning about drug discovery. And I'm like, oh yeah, AI is going to be great here because there's a lot of molecular data. And then what happened is most people don't know about this, right? Is I got it. I was in it for years. I won another award to do AI in medicine. So my first award was my PhD from the United States government, which I did in California at USC,
Yep.
right? And then I go Trojans, and then I came back and 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 then I got the award from the Ontario Cancer Institute, and then I got an award from the Canadian government that came with money. So I just continued on this journey, Jason,
Yep.
right? And then what happened was I had this revelation at the same time that the people that ended up building OpenAI and Google, like the Google AI, we all had this revelation that we needed a way to associate data at long ranges. In other words, if I'm talking about my cat and I keep talking about something else and I bring up tuna, you're going to automatically wrap tuna and cat together, right? Even if the story doesn't do that, but there's some context there, right?
Right.
This is what allows language to become computational at the level in how we're using it now, right? We have these long range memories and this extremely powerful abstraction of language. And so these people, what they did is they built what they call an attention mechanism. And I didn't care about language, but I was influenced by it because I built some of these chatbots. But I didn't care about it. What I cared about was the sequences, but not that, but I got off of the sequences of DNA and all that. And because I was starting to think about protein folding, but that I went away. I went after a different problem, which is if I have a group of patients and I have 20,000 variables about those patients, how do I get a machine to really do this impossible task of finding the right combination? Jason, if I give you a deck of cards and I ask you to shuffle it for about a minute,
Yep.
you're going to create a signature of your existence that will never be replicated ever in the age of the universe.
Yeah, I have
That's,
seen. Yeah, it's incredible. It's like 10 to the 500 before you could ever shuffle a deck of cards the same again or something. It's
yeah, it's right. It's so that's with 52 cards,
yeah.
right? Now I have 20,000 genes or whatever, right? And so what happened is I went away from what was in vogue, which is the drugs, the protein folding, and I thought those are great problems, right?
Yep.
And what's his name won the Nobel Prize, and that was great. And I saw that coming, but I became interested in this was the kicker for me. I saw in this small ovarian cancer data set sorry, let me silence my phone. that that some people were surviving and some people were not. I was looking at psychiatric data sets, and the same thing was happening. Like there was
Hmm.
response, non-response, and it wasn't for obvious reasons. There was this combination. So what happened is, I created an attention mechanism, but for patient populations. It's quite different from what's used in our favorite large language model.
Yep.
But the idea is the same. It's able to, instead of shuffling the cards, right? It's
Yep.
impossible. This is able to keep some sort of trace. It sets up a collision space for the variables mathematically. I created this mathematical space that allows these things to collide and and the influences to bleed out, so you don't have to worry about the combinatorial blowup. I mean, you still have to worry, but it's much better.
So you developed like a heuristic into your machine learning instead of an algorithm. Is that kind of what you're saying?
What I'm saying is, I figured out a way to get the variables themselves to learn from their interactions. I started using the complexity of the interactions. Instead of saying, oh my God, there's 10 to the 500, right, combinations, I started realizing there's a way to keep track of the way variables interact with each other, so you don't have to do all the comparisons. This was a huge leap. And when I saw it work and it reorganized the patient, literally, like, this is what was the kicker for me. I got a data set with two different types of leukemia, AML and ALL. And we knew the answer, that the AML breaks into two other diseases.
Yep.
And I gave it to neural networks, I gave it to random forest gradient boosting, and it just learned what we told it, the two labels. But in my system, this attention thing I built, this algorithm, this
Yep.
mathematical method that allows the variables to go, it figured out that a few variables out of the thousands, it found the four that when you came together, it split the AML into two, even though I only gave it two labels. It was finding the hidden structures in the patient populations.
Incredible.
I had a revelation then. I'm like, I'm sitting on something that can unravel drug discovery, clinical trials, all of it, because our definitions of the diseases are not, they're not correct. If someone says Alzheimer's, we don't know what that means. That's a syndrome that contains multiple diseases, right?
Yeah. I just recently saw your post on that.
Oh, right. And so then, right, I just did it on LinkedIn, right? And right, the taxonomy of disease problem, right? So
Yeah.
what happened is, I took after talking to a couple of lawyers, I took a deep dive. I left academia. I left Toronto Western, Toronto General, Pre-MH. I left all these things. And I took a job at Equifax with a bunch of amazing people. I worked on the machine learning department with them, right? They gave me
Yep.
some leadership role. And at night, I would build this idea out. I built all the math. I wrote all the code myself.
Yep.
And I raised money, almost died working 100 hours a week, right? and I founded Netramark with $2 million, right? Hired a group of really talented people, and that's where it started, right? And it all started with the belief that the answer for all of these things, drug repurposing, drug discovery, and clinical trials, is at this level. I ended up I ended up predicting that a certain drug that was going to be great for sarcopenia. I had that, but then I sold Netramark. I reinvested, like it was part of the deal, right? I
Yep.
got some cash, but I moved forward with it. And then I adopted an amazing CEO that I needed. I needed business people, right?
Yeah.
You understand, right? Like so that was George Achilleos and then Josh Spiegel after that. And all because of these older gentlemen. One was Larry Alves from Johnson & Johnson, who really was paying attention to me, invited me out to the U.S. to give talks. And Dr. Luca Pani, who was in charge of the the European Medical Agency for Italy. So he was a regular, and he was paying attention. He stayed with me. And then he got involved. And then from him, I was able to branch out. I found George through my selling the company, that side. He found Josh, and we all came together, and now we're public on the Toronto Stock Exchange. And right, in terms of being known, this is a very insular, like clinical trials is a very specialized place, and it's very hard to break into.
Yeah, it's
But
very
we're getting,
esoteric, right? It's
you know,
so machine learning, LLMs, if I'm very basically in a layman's terms, if I understand how an LLM works, you input as much language into it as you can. And essentially, what it does is it builds out from every single letter patterns that are found on either side of every letter that become a word. And then from each word becomes association with how language is set up based on how it learns. Now, that's like the most rudimentary way of saying it, right?
almost. So not letters. So what you do is, so when I trained my first LLM, what I did is I took a corpus, a very large set of data,
Yep.
very different from Netramark, right? Netramark has to learn about patient populations, very expensive clinical trials. Like I just found out today, I'm getting a data set with 300 patients. I was like, yeah, right. So you know what? When I train an LLM, um, which is not necessary anymore because there's so many great foundational models. But just to answer your point, right? I wanted to do it once. So I take the corpus and then I write a program that what it does is it tokenizes the words. So Jason becomes a token, the letter A becomes a token, the comma becomes a token, right?
Yep.
And so you have all of these tokens, and then what happens is that you do what's called masking, right? Because these things are they're built usually to predict the next word. That's the way all of our favorite LLMs work. They predict the next word, the next word, next word. And so what you do is you have hickory dickory dock, right?
Yep.
The blank ran up the clock. That is called masking the blank. And what you do is you just iterate over and over, and this thing fills in the masking. And every time it does it right, its objective function rewards it, and the parameter space, Jason. So what happens is there's parameters to the neural network, to all machine learning, right?
Yep.
The parameters in a neural network is the amount of weight the node has as it connects to other things, right? The
Okay.
weight that the edge has, and then what we call bias, right? Whatever. But so, and these things are the parameters. And so in order for this to capture a language so well, you need billions of these parameters just adjusting.
Right.
And what happens is when you train with too little data, it overfits. When you train with more data, the performance goes up. And then what we thought is that if you keep hardening these, you have all these parameters, we thought this thing's just going to overfit. But what happened was this amazing thing as you got bigger and bigger, the performance lifted. And then what now the debate is that going to happen again?
Right.
I predict it will not, but it doesn't matter because we've run out of data. And if you try to get LLMs to create data, these things collapse.
Or they
They fail.
create data that is meaningless, that is something like the ghost in the machine kind of.
They're like that's magical and maybe true, but it's more likely because it's just repeat. It's not. I don't know. There's something special about the mess that you make, Jason,
Yeah.
that an LLM can't make. And you're right. There's something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so when you talk about the data sets that you're inputting for patients, are you talking about genome sequencing that you're using? Like, is that the data set? Like, what are the particular parameters of an individual patient that you are inputting into your machine, into Netramark, that become these associations and these tokens?
So Netra AI, ideally, so I have an ideal picture in my mind because I've been doing this a long time, is this. I would get attitudinal data. How do you feel about your doctor? Are you pissed off? Like all kinds of stuff. Do you believe in medicine?
Mm,
I would get that layer. I would get so questions that you would ask people, scale questions, right? I would get all your blood work, your urine, and anything else that doctors usually pick up. And then I would get gene expression, how your DNA is expressed. I'd get microRNA, the microstructure of how the DNA. I would get epigenetics, the crap that you've done to yourself,
Yeah.
right? By being a smoker or doing cocaine or exercising. Does the opposite, but it's still epigenetic. You understand the
Yep.
changes that happen? We can talk about that.
Yep.
I would get your microbiome, your poop,
Yep.
right? Very this would be magic, and I've managed to do that on data sets that are not clinical trials. Clinical trials, Jason, are expensive. These people are interested in one thing. They want to hit their p-value, their statistical significance, and so most of them do not collect that magic ideal. And so what we usually get are, depending on the disease state, maybe some genetics, maybe some scales, blood work, and all that, maybe attitudinal ECG, EEG, measures from their phone or watch, maybe if we're lucky. It's much harder. Clinical trials are not sophisticated enough to really be doing what I would like to do. But
Yep.
NetraAI is so smart that it can use those things and it will find a structure that says this doesn't explain everybody. Your data set's too small, but it finds the part of the data set that reveals the advantage of the drug. And sometimes it's as sophisticated, rarely, but sometimes it's like this gene with this gene and whatever. But sometimes it's literally like these people that respond are actually less depressed or they have a bit more brain, right? Like I just discovered something in Alzheimer's. They just have a bit more brain left in their certain area. So the machine took complete MRIs from all these people and it figured out, here's a killer one. I'll show you. This is a killer. We were helping a company with a nasal drug. Okay.
Yep.
So all we had for data was the x-rays of their sinuses. Okay. And there were 1 million pixels that we just gave NetraAI. Okay. And I'm like, what the hell? We're not going to find any, like, this is insane, right?
Yeah.
So this is what really, when I invested more, right, is when I saw it come back. And so they call the scale that you evaluate sinuses, they call it the SNOT, the SNOT.
Fun acronym, eh?
So you got it.
Yeah.
There's an ear sub one that we call the SNIRF, right? Right, okay. And so, and you can imagine your sinuses can affect you because they're connected, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Okay, well, Netra found when they're having ear symptoms, I literally witnessed it. It took these millions and it constructed a little band around the tube that connects the sinuses to the ear. And it was correlated with people that got relief from their ear symptoms.
Wow.
And that's when I was like, okay.
Okay, so I want to ask a question that goes well beyond just medicine.
Yeah.
Are we talking about, like, so you're talking, there are limited parameters because the data, you don't get a lot of data points because just like you said, you can't get your dream of getting everything from epigenetics to, you know, how your personality is, like there's just so much that you would have to ask every patient. You couldn't possibly, it'd take hours and hours and hours and no
And the
patient.
sample size is,
Yeah, it's very limited at this point, right?
And it's very expensive. Yeah.
So is this a new form of intelligence?
What is what?
Well, I'm like the word I use or I'm thinking in my head is that your NetraAI is inferring data without having a complete picture, but it's doing it accurately. Like the predictions and the models end up being correct.
Yeah, but it's not because of some intelligence or anything like that. What it is, Jason, is a trick. It's a mathematical trick that works well, and it's this: people from the machine intelligence community,
Yep.
they figured something out a long time ago, which is imagine I had a data set with the result of 4 gunshot wounds with a real gunshot
Yep.
against, let's say, a fence. We're going to shoot a fence, we're going to record the data, and we take a water gun, 4 samples of a water gun doing the same thing. Okay.
Yep.
The effect size between those 2 data sets is so huge that even a deep neural network will learn from the 4 and 4.
Yep.
You don't need that much because the effect size is huge. So imagine Netra AI, what it does is it figures out the part of this small data set that's actually explainable, right? Because there's small samples, you can't expect to be able to explain everyone with the same set of variables. And some people might be outliers, but imagine you can reveal the reason why your patients passed, and you use that to influence your next trial, right? So the trick is that if you try to model everything there, you're going to need a magical system like you're saying that can infer beyond. But here what it is you're gathering evidence around a high effect size substructure, and you use that to infer what you should do next, because that's real signal. At least there's statistical ways of evaluating these things, right?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? You're giving up knowledge about everything to see knowledge in part of it and to derive value from it. Like a Heisenberg uncertainty principle for clinical trials. Right?
Okay. And then obviously part of this, because you're part of it is the repurpose of drugs that may be on the market already, or how to steer clinical trials in the right direction in order to have a better efficacy with the drugs that they're using, right?
Yeah, so Netramark is purely a clinical trial augmentation tool now. I've used this stuff for other things before, but now we've decided to really focus on the space. It's a very great market, but it's taking time to get us in the right shape to do this. And so now we have clients in the pharma space. And what we do is we met with the FDA. We had a really great meeting with them, and the FDA recommended that because of the uniqueness of our technology, what we really should do is this. So let me teach everybody a little bit about clinical trials. If I was running a clinical trial, I'd want my drug to work for as many people as possible.
Right.
That's a fact. We're business people. We have to be selfish. But the FDA has created a path that allows that company to not screw that up. They can still give their drug to a bigger population, but they can use a company like Netramark to learn about their data, to learn about that advantage, and to now tell the company to do a pre-specified stratification based on what Netramark learns about their data, about the advantage, which means now this company that just invested all this money can go through with what they're doing, but they have an insurance policy in the form of that pre-specified cohort. In other words, the FDA evaluates their whole trial, and if they fail, they evaluate the sub one and say, hey, look, your pre-specified cohort actually worked. You got a p-value. That means that your drug works, but you just have to label your drug now that it has to be given to people who are over 6 foot tall and blonde.
Oh, interesting. So in the entire population of people in a clinical trial, I'm just going to use percentages here. 30% have a success rate. So then Netramark looks at Y and says, okay, this drug is effective only for 30%, and we can use it for specific people, right? So that it takes the generic sensation out of the drug, and then it brings it down. That is very interesting. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. This is what I've been trying to do now for 10 years. This is precision medicine. It's taken me that long I've been talking about precision medicine for 10 years, right? But
Yep.
What's happened is then the FDA, very smart people, they're like, yeah, this is good. But then the businesses are like, oh, this is going to screw us up. We have to label our drugs. We're going to make less money. But what happened in lung cancer? The drug that sacrificed a huge part of its market, not small, I'm not talking about 10%, like a huge amount of market, is the one that won and made billions of dollars and helped many people with their lung cancer, like really helped them.
Yeah.
Because they have this programmed death ligand 1 gene mutation. What I'm doing is more complex. It's not just one gene mutation. It's characterizing the patient with between 1 to 4 variables, because you need to find this unicorn, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So that kind of brings it all together. Obviously, I don't have the skills that you do. So just from a general perspective, I was trying to think, what would it be that would allow the machine learning to be successful? And that's it. It is it is finding the people in clinical trials that it works for, and instead of throwing the whole baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, it's like, no, don't get rid of this completely. This drug is highly effective for these people, and you
Yeah,
can prove it.
yeah, and you should give credit to the FDA, because the FDA is basically saying this is your path,
Yep.
because the FDA is interested in helping. Because you got to think about it. I got to be honest with you. I met with them. These are like they're people like me. They're geeks who really care, right? Right. Like, don't get me wrong. Sometimes there's always corruption in everything, right?
Sure there is.
But
Yeah, that's human nature.
yeah, like if you look at the what happened with painkillers,
Yep.
but but anyway, but these people, they really want this to happen. So I actually really respect the way the FDA has treated this topic, the way they've treated me, right? They've recognized that this is a novel mathematical paradigm that we're using, which immediately got us into the CPIM meeting. And now they've given us recommendations, and they're waiting for our next steps. It's really great. Like, we're in a really great spot. The only problem with us is that we're dealing with companies that are making very big bets and who don't know about us, right? But they're learning. We're out there, right?
Yep. There's a word that you throw around, and recently I was looking at another article that you responded to through LinkedIn, and it was an art. It was generally an article that was talking about large language models that big pharmaceutical companies are using that is missing some mark. And you talked about heterogeneity, and that's one of the great problems. So, are we kind of, is that kind of where we're at when we're talking about this individual sort of medicine type of system? Is that every single one of us is so unique that it's not just going to work that one medication is going to be the catch all? Is heterogeneity sort of is that what you mean by it?
Yeah. So if you take the best large language model right now, they did this, and you give it the information when that lung cancer drug I was telling you about,
Yep.
and you present that data, the LLM concluded the wrong thing.
Hmm.
The path that the LLM recommended lost billions of dollars. The LLM it's able to reason very well logically, A to B, right?
Yep.
I've been working on a mathematical proof that says LLMs are wonderful because they're trained on so much data. This beautiful averaging effect takes place that allows them to be highly competent and to hallucinate sometimes. Don't get me wrong, right?
Yeah.
But a patient population. So the argument goes like this: I've trained my LLM on every clinical trial in the world. I'm like, yeah, that's nice. But your clinical trial, the clinical trial you want to help, has new doctors. There's a war in Iran. Some of these people have had COVID that your data set doesn't have. They're on a new drug.
Mm-hmm.
Attitudinal changes, placebo changes. Like, these are not. You're not modeling pictures of cats and dogs. You're not modeling what word to say next. You're modeling a system of complex systems. A
Yep.
bunch of you interacting with a drug. It's insane. And so what you need to do is you need to have a mathematical method, a set of mathematical methods that can tame that complexity.
Mm.
So what Netra AI is now is it's evolved. We still have that same core mathematical engine that's able to deal with the heterogeneity. But I
Yep.
told you, it finds the parts that are really right, which is very hard because of that 52 shuffle thing I said, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It uses that specialized attention mechanism to do that. We don't call it attention mechanism. I called it a focus mechanism years ago, right?
Yep.
We, but anyway, but it's similar. So, and then, but what it's done, what it's designed to do is to not over adhere to the labels that the doctors give it.
Mm.
So when it's learning, it's like, yeah, sure, I will find your labels within the structures.
Yeah.
And I'll recommend other labels as well. This is very, in other words, it says, I don't know. I don't know. That's the power. This is the very big difference with large language models. Large language models, you can ask it to admit when it doesn't know, but it doesn't understand what that means. Whereas Netra AI literally says, I don't know about these people. I, I don't know about them. Obviously, because there's no one in the data set that's like those people. That's going to happen when you only have
Yeah.
100 people in your clinic. There's people that are outliers, but they're not outliers. They're just not people like them. Or maybe there's one or two, right? What
Yeah.
it's going to do is going to say, actually, this is the bulk of your phenomenon. And it's going to find the variable common. It carves out these beautiful substructures within the data. And the LLMs don't have that capacity.
So, like philosophically speaking, you're almost talking about the spectrum of archetypes that are built into everybody. Like, you could take the population and it's a very general thing. Like from a 30,000-foot view, everybody who has cancer might have one or two points that's accurate. But then when you're sitting down with the person at the clinic individually, it's completely different. I wrote something down the last time we were talking about this, and I wrote down statistical generality versus subjective individuality, and it seems to be what you guys are working on.
Yeah, that's right. But that's what you have to treat. Clinical trials have to be treated specially, right? And the solution for AI as we evolve is what I call the modularity hypothesis. It's what, not me, it's what my AI community calls it,
Yep.
which is a lot like our brains, right? You don't just have an LLM. You have a prefrontal cortex, dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, temporal lobe. They're all different computers that act independently and integrated,
Mm-hmm.
right? To give context, right? When you grab a hot cup of coffee, your occipital lobe needs to know what's happening. Your prefrontal cortex needs to reason about, oh, I want,
Yep.
right? Your parietal lobe is like, I'm gonna burn this my human's gonna burn their hand unless I wrap my fingers. Context, right?
Yeah.
Situational awareness, all of it. It's all integrated. So the future of AI, which we can talk about in another podcast, is what I see as an integration. And that's what we're doing at Netra. We're taking this core thing I invented. And my new engineers are brilliant. They're taking it and they're putting it into an agentic structure. So there's this LLM age. We're really modern. And literally, this thing is built in what we call a CLI, this command line interface. This is the way the new software is working because of the way LLMs have taken. And this is beautiful. Basically, Netra AI is becoming a module, a tool
Yep.
that the other AIs can grab and do clinical trials with.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So, are you at a point where Netra AI will start teaching itself, or does it have to be constantly updated through programming and I don't know what the word is. Maybe I am
Yeah.
saying it wrong, but do you know what I
Training.
mean? Like you still have programmers that are having to code it all the time, or will it get to a point where you can sort of say, "Okay, Netra AI, here are the data sets," and it grows and builds itself from within?
Yeah, that's exactly where we're going. Yeah, that's precisely. It's a company, right? So you can't just like I might come up with a new idea. I throw it to Paul, who then refines it, goes to Adam, and then down the road it gets added to the system. Sure, there's updates like that, but the
Yeah.
system itself is becoming this self-running monster that will be able to. It's starting to reveal the true unbiased structures behind our patient populations. That's
Oh
really
man.
what's cooking.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so you currently you're really focusing on cancer. So uh, what's going on in the cancer research field with all of the new data? What are the new hopes that we have going on?
Yeah. So talk about cancer. So just to for clarity, Netramark is focused on diseases with a lot of heterogeneity. So diseases of aging,
Yep.
psychiatric disorders, and oncology. Right. Okay. So in oncology, what's happening is we had a lot of hope with these checkpoint inhibitors, which are basically drugs that alter the immune thermostat. Are we breaking up, or is our connection okay?
No, we're totally good here.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what was I saying? Yeah. So these, it's like imagine altering someone's immune system thermostat, so you can turn the immune system way up. So
Yep.
what ends up happening, right, is that in oncology, when there's a tumor, the tumor's microenvironment sabotages the immune system locally and even recruits the immune system to protect it. It's
Right.
really brutal. It
Yep.
hijacks the molecular circuitry of the immune system. If you can turn that around, the tumor's dead. And not only is it dead, if you can get the micro, what we call the micrometastatic environment, which is basically all the arterioles and stuff that keeps it alive, this gnarly mess of arteries and veins, right?
Yep.
If you can get that to go, your immune system is going to remember. And so you'll be immunized, right? So this is the immunotherapies. But there's a lot going on with that. There's CAR T, where you're literally reprogramming a person's cells to fight a particular cancer. There's ideas people have that you can, like, literally you take a sample of blood, you add this, you do this reprogramming, put it back into the person, and you get this improved response. But I honestly think that the future of oncology is going to come from gene editing, right? I think there's going to be a combination of drugs and gene. Like, I think we're going to get to the point where we can engineer away these errors that accumulate.
Interesting.
We're not there. Like what people should look out for is cystic fibrosis. If that gets cured with gene editing, we're somewhere, because that's, cystic fibrosis is.
Yeah, we
It's
talked about it briefly. It's a disease that attacks the lungs of children and eventually causes the lungs to fill with fluid and
exactly
it
right.
paralyzes the
Yeah,
lungs or it causes fluid up like a fluid that
yeah. So what? Sorry, I'm just. So what? What happens is that because of one error in their genetic coding
yeah.
for a certain protein at the surface of the lung cell,
Yeah.
it's not able to do its job, which is, I think it's a protein pump, a proton pump, right? Our cells need to keep gradients to work properly. So
Right.
we have these things on our cells that create gradients by pushing ions out, right?
Right, so that there is like an electrostatic charge essentially from
Yeah,
the
yeah.
inside to the outside.
Right. We rely heavily on this charge differential
Okay, yeah.
in our cell, right? And so cystic fibrosis, basically, there's one mutation. Um, all you have to do is correct that one, and the child will. I mean, I'm simplifying it, but
Yeah.
so I'm waiting for that. I'm waiting for, and they're children, for God's sakes, right? So
Yeah.
uh, what I'm waiting for is my colleagues in that area, to come on the news and say, "We did it. We can edit this away."
Yep.
Until I hear that, forget about the complexities of oncology. But that's where I think CRISPR,
Yep.
CRISPR.
Well, roughly I've heard about it, yeah. So
Yeah.
here's another question. I just did a little bit of research before this show, and I was looking at some stuff. I actually sent you a few videos through TikTok about this podcast called From First Principles, where they kind of dissect papers that come out and talk about the new science. And there was some interesting thing that I saw that it seems like, and I'm using anthropomorphic language here because I don't have the medical language, but it seems like cancer cells in some form become drug resistant because there's a learning mechanism that is shared within the cancer cell. Is there some truth to that?
Yeah. So what happens is, so the way I think about cancer are as like networks.
Yep.
Um, and and so I literally use programs to draw these networks and to understand what proteins are connected to what. But when you look at these networks, you can see that they weren't engineered, right? Because there's a lot of overlapping and promiscuity and like some of these proteins connect to hundreds of other proteins. So if you try to drug it, there's other paths that the cell can take on. That's what you're seeing, right?
Yeah. Okay.
It's it's the real kill. Like it. So imagine a circuit that has multiple paths. So you're disrupting one of the paths. The cell starts to it dies, right? But some of them survive because they can adjust the pathways, right? They literally mutate, like and they take on these other pathways because that's the way our cells stay alive because they're literally like factories, right? Think about all the things your cell has to do. You have to
Yep.
maintain the coherency of the DNA. You have to code for all the proteins that have the jobs. You have little garages that float around that proteins can unfold in. You have things that unknot DNA. You have things that have to carry phosphate energy, right? What do you think ATP is, right? ATP is a
Yep.
molecule that needs to be shuttled. Like it's literally astounding, right?
Yeah.
So, like a factory, if one of my conveyor belts breaks, I can just be like, transfer the process to belt number 7. All right.
Mm. So in a sense, cancer cells have hijacked our biology for their own use.
Cancer, yeah. So what happens is, so often what happens with the formation of a neoplasm, a fancy word for the beginning of cancer, right?
Yep.
Is that so? Usually, what happens is there's a set of checks and balances. There's um, there's error correcting mechanisms, Jason,
Hmm.
like literally proteins that check for errors in the DNA in the cell, and then tries to call its friends to fix it.
Yep.
And if it can't, it does something else to call a suicide signal, what we call apoptosis.
Right.
And the cell dies. So when you're young and healthy, this works like a charm. Okay. Now what happens is things like smoking, it hijacks that mechanism, the suicide mechanism.
Mm.
And so what happens is these cells become immortalized and start to replicate with their errors. And this
Ah.
grows. So the error propagates into its daughter cells, and there's no signal to kill it because nature discovered very early the best way to stop an error that's starting in a cell is to just tell the cell to commit suicide.
Right.
And what happens is there's feedback mechanisms that end up getting hijacked so that the usual signal can't work, and you end up immortalizing the cell.
Almost like a zombie type of illness inside the cell.
The zombies are a bit different. That's what happens as we age. We get senescent cells
Oh, okay.
that are
That's what I was thinking. The word senescence came to mind, but that's completely different than this cellular death.
senescence is as you age, some cells do not die, and you're right. You're not wrong.
Okay.
But in cancer, it's a similar mechanism, but it's much more pernicious,
Hmm.
right? There's
So the
value.
cell itself, it it how do I say this? Cancer
Resists.
cells, yeah, so they also become, in a sense, dissociated from the body, and they are their own thing.
Your immune system, a healthy immune system, is one of the most important things we can have, right?
Yeah.
That's why you should take zinc, D, right? So, right, but and we
Do
can
the
talk
right
about
things.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
And don't smoke, exercise. All of these things are great. Have community, have people
Hmm.
in your life.
Yep.
That's great for your immune system. Be nice to your dog and your cat, right? Please. So your immune system, and it's attitudinal. I hate it. I hate it because I yell at people who are like, "Oh, if I had cancer, I'd just think it away." I'm like, "No, you wouldn't." But attitude is important for your immune system too. But anyway, so what happens is your immune system, these cells don't listen to your immune system anymore.
Okay.
Your immune system's like, okay, I'm going to send the signal in, and apoptotic signal. But then this other guy comes up, NF kappa B comes up and screws it. That gets mutated, and then it immortalizes the cell. You get the picture. You get what's happening.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's interesting because I'm trying to use the language in my own head, and it's like holistically we are this entire thing, and in some special way, every single cell in our body is connected. Trillions and trillions of them, right? Like a grown man's got what 30 to 40 trillion human cells, all in different things. They become every part of us, and we're holistically connected, right? In some fashion, like my finger is connected to my ear, even though the ear cell knows how to be an ear cell, and cartilage grows because it's got its own genetic code that is, proteins either fold or unfold. I'm using whatever I can. I don't know the exact words. And it's interesting that cancer becomes completely independent, and it's almost like a foreign it's a foreign body within another body, where the collection of what we are is no longer speaking to this thing that is invading us. It's very interesting.
Yeah. So to me, right, just to finish this up, to me it looks like this. Okay.
Yep.
Your friend is P53. This thing is a sentinel. It observes your DNA. It tries to correct, damage and all this. You smoke a cigarette, and your P53 starts to be unable to call its buddies, Bax and Puma and Noxa, if I'm remembering them correctly. These are names of proteins that have jobs.
Yep.
So it's not correcting the damage. This Puma, it's not doing its job. So then another protein called NF kappa B comes in and says, oh, there's a lot of damage here. I got to prevent the cell from dying.
Yep.
So then the apoptotic signal, the thing that's supposed to commit suicide, is being blocked by something that's trying to help you.
So you're creating a civil war.
Right, in a way. And so that's what I'm giving you is like the initiation of the molecular machinery. This is why there's no conspiracy about curing cancer. The truth is that it's, have you ever remember those games when you were a kid that you have a bunch of sliding, squares, and you're trying to get them together to make a picture,
yep,
to get it to go from one to another. You remember?
Yeah,
that?
Yeah.
You try to shift one into place, but you move something else out of place.
Yes.
That is cancer in 17 dimensions instead of this flat thing.
Right. Instead of 1 or 2 dimensions.
Here, oh, damn it. That moved that. Okay, I'm going to move that. Oh, that moved that over here, right?
Yeah.
That's why. Go back to the source. Edit the gene. Stop it. Right? It's going to take a while.
And so our current model, or our current way of fighting almost all cancers, or the most aggressive ones, is burn the whole house down and hope you save the basement, and then build the house back after you've destroyed. And I'm really making this rudimentary, right? Like my mother had cancer. She had a form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and so chemo and radiation just about took her. I mean, she almost died from the treatment. She did survive, and she got 7 more years, and then ultimately passed away from a heart attack, which may or may not have been related to all of what happened in her life. She was also heavy and a smoker and didn't exercise. She did everything wrong. Still loved her no matter what. But, the treatments for a lot of cancers are literally like you can't just target it at one specific level. So you have to do it in a gross sort of way, right?
So for your audience, right?
Yeah.
We all remember when we had headphones in our pocket and they got knotted.
Yes.
Okay. So in evolution, a protein evolved as cells became more complex, You have to remember the DNA has to get unzipped. It's usually nicely collected around histones. It's very nice, and you get those, the pictures you see of DNA.
Yeah,
But in
this
reality,
helical staircase type of thing. Yeah.
yeah, it's so beautiful. In real life, when the cell needs to be like, I need to code for this protein. I need more of this protein. It has to unzip so you can encode for the mRNA that then becomes the protein. And when you unzip, you're unzipping these long. You can imagine how long these things are, and they get tangled.
Yeah.
So a protein evolved that literally cuts. It cuts it and sews it back together so it can unfold. And this is happening in you all the time. It's called that protein that does this.
Yeah.
It's called topoisomerase. And there's a group of drugs called toposides because the reasoning of this amazingly brutal, brilliant person is that cancer has to do this way more than the other cells.
Yeah.
So let's have a race. I'm going to stop it from being able to do it. Your DNA is going to be tangled. Your cells are going to become unable to produce proteins. It's toxic. It can blind you. Brutal. But because cancer has to replicate so often under these very high energy situation, it can work. And so that's that. So you're right. I'm just giving you the mechanism. We hit the parts that help us maintain our health. That's what the chemotherapies do. The immunodrugs are now doing something else. They're now trying to get the immune system to turn back against the tumor and rip it apart. And when
Gotcha.
it works, it really works.
Yeah, there's some, like in the last decade or so, maybe a little bit longer, the immunotherapies have come a long way, and there are pretty incredible results now for certain cancers, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and there's CAR T. Anyway, I think that's another pod. We should have a cancer podcast.
We just might have to. So going to that, there is a lot of different types of cancer. Now, obviously, some cancers are much worse than others, and does it have to do with the complexity of the protein folding and unfolding that is causing some cancers to be much more aggressive or worse?
You're interested in what makes them, like, what makes some more aggressive than others?
Yeah, so you hear like a man can get prostate or colon cancer, and within 6 months he's okay if it's caught early enough and he's healthy enough and he does the right thing. Things can be all right.
Yeah, like my dad has prostate cancer right now, and he's gonna probably keep it till he dies. And it might not even kill him.
But then there's other cancers that if they're a death sentence no matter what. Now, each one is I'm saying this, just a cancer, but what is the big difference? Why are some racing through your body at breakneck speed and others kind of just sit there and do their thing in one little section and people can live with them until their death? They don't even die of them.
Yeah, it's a great question. And what it is, so it's the different molecular machinery that gets turned on and off. It's not the protein folding stuff.
Okay.
It's the different molecular machinery that turns on that alters the mitotic rate, so the rate at which it multiplies.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And the other factor is the metastatic proclivity, right? So how how invasive is it get into your lymph nodes and spread and land and set camps in other organs and grow and take over. This is the problem. The way cancer kills you is it replaces your organ function with useless cells, right? So it has to do with the replication, the speed of some cancers are relatively stable. They grow, but they grow slowly and they don't metastasize.
Yeah.
Other times, Jason, it just has to do with the molecular environment of the host, of the person, right?
Yeah.
And there's epigen. The answer is we don't have that completely characterized, man.
Yeah.
We don't but those two factors I'm giving you are very important. And like metastasis, that's a real problem.
Right.
That's what really kills people, right? Because what happens is lung goes to brain. Right? It's just a mess.
And then, so obviously, I think what we're getting back to is that we're talking about the heterogeneity of everybody, which is epigenetic factors. Everybody has had a different lifestyle. It could be the amount of stress that you've dealt with, whether you were a smoker or non-smoker, how much you exercised in your life. And then it appears like in some ways there's,
It's mostly what you get from your parents.
oh, interesting. So there, it is a highly genetic component.
It's environment and genetic. There are people who can smoke and drink their whole life and never get cancer
Yep.
because they have that immune system, right? They
Yeah.
have other factors that we don't even understand. And right, but that's what we've learned. It's really like there's families that have cancer. Right?
Mm,
There's oncology that people like. There's a reason why women volunteer to have their breasts removed
right.
because there's a mutation that they carry, and BRCA gene, right?
Yeah.
A lot of Jewish women have it, and, right? But it's not just Jewish women, but There's a certain line that goes through the Ashkenazi, um, uh, bloodline, right?
Yeah. I guess that's similar to Alzheimer's, right? There's a specific gene that you may get on both sides. Yeah, ApoE4. You've heard about it. You know, Chris Hemsworth, the famous actor, he's got the ApoE4 on both sides of his bloodline. So there's this big concern. You know, I even have a friend of mine whose mother passed away in her 40s from Alzheimer's, and then her brother, or sorry, this fellow's brother just used MAID. um, he was diagnosed at like 39 or 40 years old with Alzheimer's and took a rapid turn for the worse, but had already set up. He knew he wasn't going to make it. And so, just as he was getting to the stage where things were getting really bad, he had 3 children, his wife and he had a farm. Things were going to be where she was going to have to care for him in an old age home, or, you know, the real difficult struggles that people go through when there is a disease that's just tearing somebody apart. He opted to end his life on his terms. And mother to son, obviously a genetic predisposition, right?
So the best example of that is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS.
Yeah.
And what I did work in ALS, and I met people that have, gone down that path.
Yeah.
I read her poetry before she went, and that's a disease where it gets triggered by something in your life, or you have the familial version of that disease.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's that to me is a brutal. I did some work, and there's some hope there, right? But that's a tricky one. But anyway, I give you that example because that's an example of a disease
Yeah.
where there's a familial subtype, and then there's the wild, like, just anyone can get it, right?
Yeah.
But there seems to be a pattern with environmental stuff. I believe that there's vulnerabilities that people sometimes there's a familiar version, and then there's people who are born with a vulnerability, and just the wrong thing in your life hits,
Yeah.
right? And hits that vulnerability and causes that cascade I'm talking about in that network.
Yeah.
Right? That's the way I see these things.
Yeah. It's very unfortunate because it's the indifference of nature that we're kind of talking about here. You know, it's so unfortunate when you just a new example. One of the quote healthiest men that you would ever see was a CrossFit champion. I don't remember his name right now, but he recently passed away. He ended up with cancer in his jaw, and then it spread through his body. And this was a guy who lived in the most healthy sense in every possible way, and still ended up with a very aggressive form of cancer and died. And, you know, like, you can do everything right, or you can be the one that does everything wrong, and you have two different outcomes, right? It's not equity. There is no equity in nature. It's completely indifferent. And there is just, we're all N of one patients when it comes to what may or may not happen to us.
Yeah, that's why I encourage all people to have some, even atheists, to have some form of spiritual practice, because there is a way to I mean, it sucks no matter what. It sucks. But there's a way to um, approach life with gratitude
Hmm.
and with loving kindness and gentleness that the world needs big time now. But there's another layer. Some of these practices, like Vipassana, like the basic Buddhist meditation,
Yep.
these things are beautiful because what it does is it peels who you think you are from what you really are.
Hmm.
Like we walk around thinking we're this static identity.
Right.
But from my perspective as a mathematical scientist, we're this monstrously dynamical creature connected to everything, right?
Yeah.
And if you can start understanding that you're connected to everybody else and everything in a very intimate way, that you're locked away from that because of your ego. And if you can just peel away just a little bit, I'm not talking about becoming a saint, just peel away so that you can like start to observe it and say, oh yeah, that pattern there. I suffer because of that pattern right there.
Yeah.
Right? I see having that present. That's what's great about Vipassana because the practice literally is you sitting, breathe, watching your breath, getting distracted, going, I'm distracted, pop it, don't analyze, come back, right? And watch your breath again or the weight of your seat or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
depending, breath is good, right? And then you get distracted and you undulate. You do this dance. And what happens is after a couple of years of doing this dance, you stop one day and you're just watching yourself. And it's an amazing thing to experience. Because then you start realizing like, oh, I'm not real in the way I think I am.
Oh yeah,
I'm
that's
real in
beautiful. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I came back. I have admitted this publicly a lot. I was really kind of a terrible atheist for a long time. I went from being raised in a Lutheran church and going through baptism and confirmation and, doing communion and being an altar boy where I helped with the church duties and going to Bible studies and going to Bible camps, to realizing at the age of 13 that none of it made sense. There was a missing piece for me. And as I talked to you earlier about why I became such a voracious reader, was I was looking for an answer to something that just never sat with me. This idea that I was God just kind of like put me down on earth and that was my fate. And it didn't feel right. It felt like there was something much greater to the entire cosmos and our existence within it. And
Yeah.
after more than 20 years and dealing with my own life, and we all have our own traumas and we have our own challenges, right? It's like waves on an ocean. You're sometimes on the crest and sometimes you're down in the trough. And when you're down in the trough, you can't see anything but water. And when you're on the crest, then you can see the horizon and the beauty of life again. And I came back to spirituality and my own ideas on what God is to me, and it has finally given me a sense of fulfillment. So it it's just like what you hear about men and women who are searching for relief from addiction. AA is one of the best examples of this. One of the 12 steps in AA in order to overcome the monster on your back is to find spirituality or find God. And those that are successful in AA end up developing a personal relationship with what you could probably just call source in order to appease everybody. The ultimate thing that brings us together, like the unifying factor that proves to all of us that we are all of something that is the same thing.
You
And
know,
you're right. It beyond the indifference of the universe is that there is something so transcendently beautiful about being alive. And if you can grab onto that,
yeah, and you can be an atheist and have that experience as
100%,
well,
100%.
right? Like that's the whole thing is that my problem with religiosity is the lack of honesty
Mm,
about how uncertain we all are. See, certainty is a curse, right? It's a curse. It's this like this certainty people have.
yeah.
right? This is a very big problem.
Yeah, well, I think
Um,
that that's a human problem built into religion that dissolves the greater truth or the greater idea, the metaphor and the allegory built into religions, because then you humanize it with dogma.
yeah, right. Dogma that like your BS, your belief system.
Oh, there you go. That's a nice double entendre right there.
So our BS, as Robert Anton Wilson called it, our reality tunnel, is um, is just that. There's this like all desire to point at something and say, "Oh, this is it. This is really fear of the grandiose nature of the universe just expressing itself because there is nothing to hold on to. That's the ultimate revelation through my, all my work on that side of things. There's nothing to hold on to,
Right.
and if you can get comfortable with uncertainty and the free fall, it means ultimately that your ego is going to have to fade because your ego can't handle it.
Hmm. Yeah, and I, I I think I recognize that in myself, that what was driving my propensity to atheism uh, was was an ego thing, where I can remember the sensation of arrogance because I got really deep into learning about science from a generalist perspective. I and all of the science things, especially when you read an atheist scientist, like I'll take Richard Dawkins for example. I love the way he writes when he talks about evolution and biology and a lot of his works. It's beautiful. He is such a great writer. But then you also end up realizing the dogma built into his system of belief, right? And so,
Oh, this is interesting. I've been to churches where there was strong dogma and I was very uncomfortable,
mhm,
right? I was dating a girl, right?
yep,
And then I went to a place which was their dogma was atheist, strong, hard atheism. And I felt the same way
hmm,
because there's a lack of that vacuum, that nice spaciousness that somebody like you, the reason I like you, right? The reason why I love my wife is that there's this spaciousness to her BS, right? It's not, you know,
hmm,
puckered like this, right?
yeah,
Right. And and the other side of it is that science. So this is the beautiful thing here. Okay, in science you can't really know. People don't understand. This is the complaints about science. Oh, you think you know everything. No, no. Sure, okay. We know that you can't throw the football with a few newtons of force and it'll continue to go up. We know that because you can just perform that experiment
yep,
and you can negate it. My hypothesis is I can hit the moon with the football, but every experiment negates it, and you kind of like, yeah, okay, well, that's not possible.
yep,
But positive knowledge, for example, um, that the structure of space time is pixelated and quantized.
yep,
I can do the math to make that work. I did it, but it doesn't mean I know that's true. It means I have a hypothesis and a theory. And even if my experiments start to confirm, and there's even experiments that we're trying to run, physicists are trying to run to show that the universe might be pixelated at a fundamental level.
yep,
So far, they're all negative, but even if it came back affirmative, it doesn't mean I know it. I just know that I have a piece of evidence, right? And what happens is I can then start to hypothesize, and then it might become a theory. And a theory has stood up to a lot of that evidence, and it's like, okay, we know, but know in science is always with uncertainty because you can always build on top of your knowledge.
right.
It's not like I know that God made everything and that's it. No, like right? There's always stuff. There's still like physiology we haven't discovered.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, sure. We still don't know much about biology, right? And we've been studying it for hundreds of years.
yeah, but I mean, like, I remember like 20 years ago, I was reading an article about the heart cells were just discovered to have a role in calcium distribution. Like, I'm like, what? Didn't we know everything about the heart, right?
So are you talking about Gödel's incompleteness theorem here, that you can't really ever get to all of the answers because there's assumptions built into everything, right?
Gödel's incompleteness theorem is much tighter than that.
Okay.
It doesn't say that. Gödel's incompleteness theorem says that if I axiomatize a system
Yep.
of logic and it's weak, like it doesn't contain arithmetic,
Mm-hmm.
then every axiom and every statement has a line. I can prove any statement in that system, true or false, by a logical set of reasoning from the axioms. Once I contain arithmetic in my system, right,
Yep.
you're screwed. It means that some statements of my axiom I cannot reach. There are statements in that math
Yep.
that I can't demonstrate to be true or false.
Because of the
Okay.
axioms, right?
Not because of the axioms, but because there's an undecidability to certain statements, right? You can't prove them wrong or right,
Oh, okay.
right? It just means that, yeah, it means that it's there's actual like the real way to think of it is like that logic itself at that level, at the level of arithmetic,
Mm-hmm.
is incomplete. You can't resolve all things that you would ask of that system just from the axioms. You
Oh,
never
okay.
could. And then if I take the axiom where that fail, the set of axioms where that fails, and I just take it and I plug it into my new one, I open up new undecidable statements.
Mm.
So I can keep building I can keep building into more and more sophisticated axioms. Doesn't matter. Once you hit arithmetic and above, there's statements that you can make, right? Like every even number is the sum of two primes, right? We've never proved that before.
Oh,
That
okay.
might be provable. Don't get me wrong. I'm just using it as an example.
Okay, so my understanding of Gödel was more on a philosophical level. I didn't realize that there was it was much more complex into the arithmetic and to equations and stuff.
Yeah, it was what it is Gödel was a very powerful mathematician
Mm-hmm.
who the ended this reign of a certain philosophical and logical attitude towards math, and he demonstrated that it's undecidable. In other words, math is bigger than we ever thought. Right? There's even logic can't reach some of the statements in
Interesting.
this palace of wisdom.
Yeah.
As I like to call it sometimes. Yeah.
So
And yeah, there's philosophical consequences, but you have to be careful about that.
yeah. So we're into an hour 46, and what happened was we got into the beginnings of the philosophy of life here, and I think it's kind of a good it'll be a good way to end this one. I'm hoping that we can record a bunch more because the possibilities are infinite, as your 2-year-old self would have thought. Um, do you recall an old story? I just wanted to finish with this one because it kind of talks about what we were saying philosophically and how to look at your life. And I don't have it remembered very well, but there's a story that one day somebody approached Buddha and asked Buddha what the definition of life was, and Buddha's response was not to suffer. And I thought, when I read that, I thought, okay, maybe that seems really complex for people, but I think that makes life beautiful when you are able to live life instead of suffer it.
Yeah, and it's a, it's something I struggle with, right? Because that's very wise. I mean, not but the problem is that we make so many choices that are bad for us.
Mm-hmm.
And if you abide by that rule and you really make choices that are going to reduce suffering for yourself and for others, That's a very wise path, but we screw it up. You know how many people complain to me about their life and stuff, and I'm like, well, have you just tried to cultivate some gratitude? Because there's a lot of great stuff in your life, right?
Yeah, and this is it's very cliche to say, but it's so true because the word gratitude that you've said a few times, it really is sort of the ultimate salve. It's kind of if you can be grateful every day for something, and it's almost impossible to find a person. I mean, I know that there are people that have what you would consider suffering in their life that is the most terrible form of suffering. But at
Yes.
some point in their life, there could have been and would have been something to be grateful for. And if you can find that and speak to that, you know, perhaps there is a way to overcome the indifference of life and the challenges of the tragedy of existence.
There is hope. And maybe to close, the hope is that if you can move past the suffering, you become a much better version of yourself. And that's the hope there. Because sometimes you're right, people do go through unimaginable pain because of, death and loss and disease and whatever. But if you can make it through it, you become another version of yourself. That's really, I think that's a real truth
Yeah.
that we don't often, you know.
I think we'll end it right there, Dr. G. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
man. It was, we did an hour and 50 and it felt seamless and it felt like a few moments. So always a good conversation when it flows like that and you don't notice the slow march of time. Hopefully we'll
No,
see
I
you
love
again,
it.
man.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Let's do another one.
Okay. We will for sure. Cheers, everybody.
Okay. Ciao.